AUSAR Thompson's athleticism, playmaking, and shooting flashes make him a potential top 3 pick in the 2023 NBA Draft. This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break him down. Overtime Elite's AUSAR Thompson has ideal measurements for an NBA wing at 6'7" with a 7-foot wingspan. And then he has that type of incredible explosiveness only seen in the top 1% of NBA athletes. More often than not, it's been in transition where this has really popped up for AUSAR. The catch here is the Overtime Elite environment, which is way more fast-paced than college, and everything is played in the open court to a much larger extent than any other league you'll see a draft prospect in. So with AUSAR, more than 1/4 of his nearly 30% usage came in these open court situations. That will go down in the NBA, but I'm more focused on his tools and how they're going to translate. Thompson is so dynamic, quick with his burst, lengthy and fast with his strides, and very creative with how he uses his body and touch. In his first year with OTE, I thought he was slightly more one-dimensional back then. He was still impactful in transition, but his highlights were coming almost exclusively because of his tools. This season, my impression is that Thompson has slowed down. He's more comfortable now switching gears and playing off of different paces, rather than only pushing the accelerator. AUSAR's improvements mean that his drives are now more intentional. Everything we just touched on shows up in the half court, where again, it's remarkable to see how much more comfortable AUSAR has gotten at decelerating. Any ball handler should be able to, but this is particularly lethal when you consider Thompson's first step and speed. My biggest takeaway through all of this is how Thompson has all the means to be a walking mismatch. AUSAR is too big for smalls and too explosive for bigs, and really for most wings as well. Whenever he's playing in tight spaces, AUSAR's body control is truly something to watch. How him and his brother Amen manipulate their limbs to contort their frame around defenders and then finish from tough angles is super unique. OTE was heavily reliant on transition and it lacked half-court spacing a lot of the time, but AUSAR found ways to make it work, even when playing with non-shooters. Going forward, I want to see Thompson finish strong and through defenders a lot more. He can do it or get to the line rather than almost always going for the home run, tougher finishes, which become even more difficult in the NBA. And then, arguably the biggest improvement point for AUSAR looking ahead will be to really keep improving his left hand. I understand some of the concerns around AUSAR's finishing, but I'm not that worried right now other than this. He's gonna have to certainly expand his game in the half court, but overall I thought his volume at the rim was okay given the context. OTE stats are tricky to track, but I have Thompson at about 140 total shots and converting on around 62.5% at the basket. That's improvable for sure, but I think a lot of it can be mended simply through AUSAR being able to use both sides of the floor. He can't do that consistently enough yet, and teams have picked up on it. Right now, when he goes left, he's most likely going to go back to his right hand, which makes him predictable and prone to getting blocked. This is a long-standing issue for AUSAR and one that really has to be addressed. If it is, I wouldn't be surprised if something of a domino effect happened. Thompson's versatility will grow, which in turn opens up new spaces for him and others. He's more likely to get to the free throw line more, and also his overall athletic tools are going to be even more maximized. As with most young wings, Thompson will have to keep getting stronger. It doesn't happen to him as often as his brother Amen, but Thompson still can lack physicality. After rewatching the tape, I'll admit that AUSAR's adjustment curve in the NBA might take a little longer than I first anticipated. However, these are fixable concerns. Even through that, there will be plenty of other ways for Thompson to contribute. Transition is the clear low-hanging fruit, but I also love AUSAR off the ball. The idea here is leveraging AUSAR's pop and burst going downhill to get him open looks. This can also mean lobs, where AUSAR finds it easy to play above the rim with his first step and verticality. Thompson had 40 dunks for the year, but in all honesty, it could have been way more. Everything we just touched on also shows up with Thompson's rebounding on both ends. He averaged about 7 boards a night this season. And in a few months, I'll also be intrigued to see if NBA teams use AUSAR more in the post. This can either be to score, as we're seeing here, but he also has the potential to play make some for others, like we'll dive into later. In terms of scoring, I'll also be keeping a close eye on how AUSAR's in-between game develops. There are some signs of life, but few. Thompson took less than 15 of these types of shots all season and made only about a third. Still, I am optimistic about the process. Like I said, I trust that Thompson is almost always going to get to his spots, especially once that left hand develops. So if AUSAR can then chain moves and counters together before getting into his offense, that's huge. He's shown some of that already. I like this one where he's snappy and creative plus dangerous with that blow-by threat. So he gets everyone off balance and scores with some really advanced self-creation. Overall, I feel good about AUSAR as a scorer. He's going to be really dangerous in transition. I think he'll improve as a finisher overall. And then there's plenty of ways to use him in the half court, either next to other playmakers or making the most out of his athleticism. Right now though, the biggest question mark is his shooting. Now, there's a distinction to be made here between AUSAR's shooting and his scoring. He can get buckets, about 17 points a night in this season's Overtime Elite League. But Thompson is still incredibly inconsistent as a jump shooter. This is definitely a concern, especially as the NBA gradually becomes more and more driven by offense. The concern probably doubles if you envision AUSAR on the ball most of the time. I don't, but still, I do think he's going to see plenty of the rock in his hands. The first thing then with the shot is the form, which to be fair, it has gotten better over time. But I just don't think it's conducive to pulling up off the dribble. However, it's not like Thompson converts his open threes at a high clip either. I do think that his shot probably fits these looks a little better, but teams can afford to leave Thompson open on a catch and shoot. And I'm not a stickler for mechanics, but they remain wildly inconsistent, and it's clear that tweaks will continue to be needed. At the OTE level, where Thompson is quite frankly head and shoulders above the rest of the competition, defenses respect him from everywhere. But in the NBA, I'm pretty sure defenders would feel fine letting him shoot it every single time. At this point of AUSAR's development, playing against a set defense in the half court is a test. He shot 30% off the bounce there from 2, and his overall percentage from deep going back to his pre-OTE days in high school is very similar. From 3, Thompson tends to shoot around 30%. Beyond the actual shooting though, which we will continue to dive into, I think the real concern comes if AUSAR doesn't kind of max out in every other category. For instance, if he's never shooting more than like 32% from 3, but he also continues to have a difficult time going left, then that's very worrying. And although Thompson could offset OTE's lack of spacing a lot of the time, how that sort of setting translates into the NBA is very much an unproven question still. AUSAR is gonna be a really high pick, but the organization that drafts him is gonna have to be confident about these doubts. As for me, this might surprise you, but I actually do feel somewhat confident in AUSAR's shot developing decently. For one, he's not a non-shooter, which is key. Thompson might only make around 30% of his trays, but I like his volume. In 121 games going back to high school, he's taken 466 threes. His disposition to shoot extends to the free throw line. Thompson has to take trips to the charity stripe even more often, but on almost 500 free throws, he's made nearly 71%. That's not awesome, but it offers a little bit of hope. And then outside the numbers, it's also what I'm seeing on the court. AUSAR's OTE team won the league this year, and he was the finals MVP with this title-winning 3, for example. When the big moments arrive, AUSAR is gonna have the ball in his hands. Or if it's late in the shot clock, he doesn't mind taking a tough 3 off the bounce. Those are things that cannot really be factored into objective facts, but they're really encouraging intangibles on the tape. On top of that, it also intrigues me how easily Thompson can get into his shot at times. He can isolate or take jumpers out of step backs or side steps, which speaks to his confidence and comfort level despite the numbers. Now don't get me wrong, this is an optimistic point of view that I'm taking. Thompson's true shooting percentage at about 55% is very improvable, his 30% from deep and the mid-range even more so, but with his willingness, his volume, and sometimes touch, I think there's enough for me here to just about buy into the shooting improvements happening long term, especially when I like the other parts of AUSAR's game as much as I do. That includes his playmaking. Even though Amen is the point guard of the two twins, AUSAR is also a capable facilitator with the ball in his hands. He's not as creative or versatile as a passer, but I think he'll be more than fine. Thompson averaged about 6 assists for every 3 turnovers more or less, so at a 2-to-1 ratio that's pretty good, particularly since I project him as more of a secondary playmaker. Like with his scoring, a lot of this is coming in transition right now. As a ball handler, Thompson will get your team up the court in seconds, be it with his blazing speed or with his rapid outlet passes. He can toss those with one or both hands. I'll need to keep seeing more in the half court, but generally I'm pretty encouraged by the reads that AUSAR can make. He's someone who constantly generates advantages on offense through his combination of skills, so I feel like his talent always ends up popping in one way or another. His technique might still need more refining, but when the ball is in his hands, he forces the defense to make tough decisions. More often than not, the plan is to sag off of Thompson, but then it's dangerous to give him a runway. And if his passing continues to grow as his finishing improves, then he's also going to be able to drive and kick at the NBA level like he's been doing at OTE. Like with his driving, AUSAR is largely right-handed, too much so to the point where it can be limiting, but I like his precision and ability to dish passes right into the accurate pocket. We've seen this in both of Thompson's seasons with Overtime Elite before going into the league, and reads like these make me believe that he's eventually going to be able to see both sides of the floor, even if plenty of work is definitely still needed. That work starts with ensuring that AUSAR actually is able to go left and not be so limited. When teams take away his right hand, Thompson becomes a lot more unsure. Also, the game has slowed down some for AUSAR, especially as a scorer, but this will need to keep happening. Right now, he'll still get rushed and misplaces passes when that happens. It's frustrating because I actually think his accuracy is pretty good, and the reads that he makes are largely correct, but then he'll put the wrong speed or weight on his deliveries. From time to time, Thompson can also get out of control and turn the ball over, but I also think that as a result, this means that many of his turnovers are correctable. Still, it's worth keeping in mind that the speed of the game and the geometry of the court in the NBA is going to look totally different. In the long run, this will benefit AUSAR, but early on, there could be somewhat of a steep learning curve. I'm pretty high on AUSAR Thompson as a defender, but it is admittedly largely based on projection around his tools and understanding of the game. From a numbers standpoint, AUSAR was promising, about 1 block and more than 2 steals per game. When it mattered most at the OTE level, he largely showed up. However, it's just so tough to gauge how that OTE style translates into the NBA. And I think that this is especially the case on defense, where I'm really just not sure how that carries over. OTE has improved every year and at a pretty fast pace, but the competition level can still get better. Still, AUSAR has the length to block shots and get steals or deflections. And even when his impact isn't outright on the stat sheet, his 7-foot wingspan and quick pop off the floor make him really tough to get a shot over. NBA teams are going to be able to deploy him at the point of attack to stonewall drives and close off angles. He's 6'7", but AUSAR is going to be able to keep up with guards, he has the foot speed to match them laterally, and I like his reaction timing. Thompson's quick twitch and tools really should show up on both ends. With OTE, this was most apparent in the passing lanes, where AUSAR was always somebody to be accounted for there. And then, stepping closer towards the basket, he also had some flashes of rim protection at about 1 rejection per game. With how much ground Thompson covers, I do think he projects as a positive help side defender, but I'm just not sure that he's been asked to make high-level defensive reads so far. I have faith in him definitely, but it is blind up to a certain point. Once he gets drafted, Thompson is probably going to take some time to come around to new concepts and even in a way, new player types. It is tough to tell how difficult this adjustment is relative to other rookies from college or other paths, but OTE largely benefits guards and bigs in my opinion, so AUSAR hasn't truly competed against many high caliber wings. Him and his brother are wing sized, but even they play like guards, and they were on the same team this year. Last season was different and I liked some of the flashes, but with such a small sample size, it's tough to come to any real conclusions. Right now, Thompson has one bad habit to shed, which I don't think speaks to him, but more to how imposing he's been at this level. AUSAR and his brother Amen dominated OTE, so I can't blame them for not always being super invested when they could just kinda turn on the afterburners whenever. Still though, Thompson is better than giving up these blow-bys. Whenever he's not engaged, he defends too upright with his hands down and not giving multiple efforts. That means that guys who shouldn't get past him do. In the long run, I'm not worried, but this just has to stop happening. There are also the off-ball lapses that happen from time to time, but given the environment and the youth, even if the Thompsons are slightly older, these things are only natural. Falling asleep off the ball is going to happen to most prospects at this stage, and I'm generally optimistic about defensive development in the NBA for guys with a base and pre-existing tools. AUSAR has both of those in spades, so I'm really excited to see him in a different context once he's a high pick in this year's draft. If AUSAR Thompson hits, he's the type of prospect that can get you top 3 return value. He's a wing-sized, uber athletic ball handler who's able to create advantages on the floor in almost every way, shape, or form imaginable, except for the shooting and except for the left hand. Those are the two big ifs when it comes to AUSAR Thompson. I think he's a top 3 talent, but whether or not he goes that high in the lottery really depends on how confident teams are about both of those things, I think. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of AUSAR Thompson, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, if you want to watch more content like this, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll catch you guys next time.